Hello and welcome back to The Stage Door, presented by Camber Arts on Rogers TV, right here in Corner Brook. This week I'm here with my co-artistic director, the founding artistic director of Camber Arts, David Maggs. So David, thanks so much for coming on the show while you're here in town.
Well, it's a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
There we go. It's always interesting when we have someone so directly connected with Camber because I have to be the interview host and I know many of the things that I'm going to ask you, but maybe there will be some surprises.
Pretend they're curiosities.
So we'll start before Camber in its current existence and go back to the roots, because that's a question we always ask the artist on this show, and that is, where did it all begin for you?
In terms of Camber Arts, which was Grossmore Summer Music before it was Camber Arts, there was just a desire to continue the kind of rich artistic life that I had lived growing up in Corner Brook, and making sure that that was something that expanded and extended beyond my student days here. It was a love of being in this community. It was a love of making music and art with the people that were in this community, and a desire to continue to be together with the community. I guess that making art in my favorite form of it is a way of being together. And our world has precious few ways of getting together these days. We have so many ways of pulling ourselves apart. And it was a desire to put something in place that was a vehicle to bring us together. And whether that was in our early days as just a kind of classical music festival, or as we started to evolve into different kinds of music, or as we started to evolve into different kinds of music and theater, or as we started to move into the digital world, all of those things have been an exercise in figuring out how the arts help us come together as a community.
Mm-hmm. I think community has always been such a root, and I mean, this show is a part of that community. In terms, there's been so much. We do a weekly episode on something happening here in Corner Brook every week. You know, we've had a couple that we didn't, but that was only because we were too busy doing the things in Corner Brook. So it's a really special thing that there's something to talk about every single week of the year here in Corner Brook.
Yeah. It is a remarkable thing, and I think that it's something that you can easily take for granted if you live here, because it's kind of the water that this community swims in. But there are a lot of communities that just don't have that kind of way of thinking about themselves out loud and coming together to have a kind of ongoing dialogue about who we are and where we are and why we are and how we are, and all those things get thought about in the arts in a way that is, I think, very compelling.
Yeah, and as you said, growing up in Corner Brook, you were always inspired by that community, which eventually led to the creation of Camber Arts, then Grossmore Summer Music. What were some of the key things in your youth that really stuck with you to go on that journey, to pursue music and then pursue coming back home?
I think a big part of it was my teacher and the teacher of so many people in this community, Gary Graham, and the kind of world that he opened up for people through the arts and through the performing arts, because he always brought more than just music to what he did with youth artistically. So that would be like 90% of that answer was just, you know, that person and the exceptional amount of energy and talent that he put into so many people to make that a kind of normal magic that was part of living here. That was a big part of it. I think the other part of it was that when I was growing up, and this is something that I think has changed and is something we want to sort of think about, is that a lot of that stuff was part of how a child was raised. You were raised singing in choirs. You were raised participating in music. You were raised doing youth theater. Those sorts of things were a central part of how you grew up. And I'd like to think we're doing some of the things in the community now that are bringing that back. The work that you're doing at the Graham Academy, for example.
Yeah, no, I think it's been an impressive legacy. You know, Graham Academy is started in 2016, and that means 2026, fall 2026 is a big year. That's a 10-year anniversary, which is so exciting. So we'll certainly have lots on the radar for that.
Yeah.
But I think it's quite exciting that, you know, you've said in the past that Graham Academy was something you started not so much for something that you yourself would be here on the ground involved in, but something to not only support the community and the youth that are growing up in it, but also to support our local artists by giving them a space to not only work, but a space to meet collaborators, a space that they can come into in a former convent on 110 Humber Road to connect, you know, building a community for them as well, which I think is a really special thing.
There was, you know, at the time when we were trying to figure out how do you be an arts organization in those years, what does it mean to be a compelling and effective arts organization in a community? What do you have to do that well? And the answer for a long time was, well, you play concerts to an audience. And that was the sort of the job, as if there was this kind of steady need for concerts, and luckily you were there to supply them. And that started to kind of break down as the digital world changed what audiences are, and we started to behave really differently in terms of going out and doing things and what our cultural appetites were. We had to think about what does it mean to be a cultural organization, and that started to change the way that we operated. And that's partly why the Graham Academy was an important component of what Camber Arts needed to do, where it could create a range of different activities for artists to commit to and be in a community doing, so that their lives remained viable and that they were able to then contribute to the community in a way that we see now as a fairly stable part of what we're able to offer.
Yeah, I think it's been really a special place to grow for myself. You know, 2016 was the year I graduated, so to get offered a position to teach young folks in the arts was intimidating. It's not where I expected to go. As many young artists who just graduate, it's like, I'm gonna hit the stage, I'm gonna be the performer. So it totally changed my path, you know, and I think it has now shaped into a space where we have a graduate, Kira Clark, who is going in through theater school, and I'm sure will perform many times, but is already teaching, is already doing some of that for the next generation.
That's such a great, I actually didn't put that together, but I really appreciate you identifying that, because I think our training programs have been slow to evolve, right? So typically the way that we train artists in a lot of our programs is as if the kind of basic appetite for just performing is sort of standard and sufficient for a lot of graduates to come out of that and do that. And we don't put enough emphasis on, I think, two things that are missing. First of all, the teaching dimension, and figuring out not just how do you do your craft, but how do you share it. That's a really important component that I think needs to be more a part of how we train young artists. And then the other piece of that is the entrepreneurial dimension. So you need to know how to do your craft, you need to know how to share your craft, but you also need to know how to build the value of your craft in a particular place.
We're so fortunate that both music teachers at CBI and CBRH are also on our faculty, which is just amazing, you know, when you consider that we only have those two schools in terms of the public school system in Corner Brook itself for grade 7 all the way to 12. We frequently partner with Immaculate Heart of Mary School, but we're so ingrained in the artistic goings-on of the community, and we share those. We have technical resources, a music library that is available to any teacher, any production. You know, tonight's the 20th. Tonight, Marcel Boisjoli and Louise Gauthier are performing at Park West with Francophone music, celebrating the Francophone Day, Journée des Francophones. And they're using some of our equipment to do that, because that's what we do. That is who we are in this community.
It's, you know, it sort of goes back to that kind of change that we felt happening. So we started in 2002 was the year that we founded this organization and built it up over those years. And it was sort of more or less the same until, as I say, in those middle years of 2014, 15, 16, where we realized that the values, the community values, the things that our community thought of as important and were the reasons that we were able to be here, making music and doing other things like that, were not fixed and permanent. They could disappear. Somebody needed to constantly grow them and tend them. They're like a crop. You have to sort of nurture it. And if someone doesn't do the nurturing of that, then our larger reason for being disappears along with it. Mm-hmm. And so the kinds of things that we're doing with the Graham Academy, or the stuff that you're leading in terms of the outreach components, to say it's not enough for us to just be a cool cultural organization. We have to create a cool cultural region. And we're obviously not the only ones that are doing that. There's lots of wonderful different organizations and artists actively building that in the region. But it was certainly a kind of change for us to say it's not enough for us to just get our own house in order. We actually have to build the larger creative ecosystem or community around us. And so the kind of outreach work of being in the schools, of making sure that concerts can happen beyond our doors that have nothing to do with us, supporting some of the different artists and organizations in the community with digital libraries or music libraries or costumes and props, those sorts of things are about saying we have to make sure that it's not just a healthy organization that we're trying to build, it's a healthy region as well from an artistic point of view.
Yeah, absolutely. So before we finish up this section of the interview, what is coming up next? I know you and I just did a 4-year plan with, thanks to Arts NL for getting that new funding system. So with our application, gave an opportunity to really make a strategy. But what does this place need to know about what is coming up?
So probably what's now familiar after 8 years of work is the way the Graham Academy is now integrated into the community and the kind of rhythm of activities as it runs its classes and programs, leading to a big spring musical theater festival in the spring. That component is really stable and growing now, and it's going to continue. What took a hit over the past 5 or 6 years was how much we were live on stage in our community. Partly that was the pandemic, partly that was because we were so busy building the academy and dealing with that development side of things, that it's been a sort of uneven part of our operation in terms of how much we're on stage in local venues, performing for local and tourist audiences. That's gone through some changes as we've become a fully year-round organization. It's allowed your artistic leadership to really figure out where performance belongs throughout the whole calendar year, rather than we used to just sort of be 4 to 6 weeks in the summer. That's one exciting component. And then starting to return to the things that we felt we were really contributing in a meaningful way to the live performance activities in our community. The other piece that I think is really exciting is that we've been trying to figure out, what does a cultural organization like ours do relative to the digital dimension of people's lives? The digital disruption, let's call it, brought about by personal computers and smartphones and all of the technology that comes with it, streaming services. Ours is not the only business model that's been broken by that interruption. All the big broadcasters like CBC and NBC and ABC and all those, they're also reeling from the disruption of digital technology. But it's really changed the way people consume culture. And it's been a big question for a little cultural nonprofit like us over in the corner of the world. Well, what do we do? Do we just stay live and sort of just present stuff that is still when people don't want to be staring at their phones? Or do we try and participate in that that larger stream of attention. The world's attention is on screens right now. And are we able to play ball in that space? And so we're going to spend the next 3 years through some really generous support from the province, IET at the province, and ACOA are supporting us to run a 3-year R&D project on how we take what we do as cultural nonprofits and move it across these different digital platforms. So it used to be that the very idea of taking your stuff and putting it on a digital platform was just too expensive for a cultural nonprofit to do. The goal of that research over the next 3 years is to take audiences and move them in 2 directions. To take our core audience that still shows up for those live events and start to move them out across the different digital platforms. Get them playing a mobile game, get them in a VR experience, get them looking at something in a location-based immersive experience. While at the same time, then take the audiences that are not our core audience, that would only ever find us in a mobile game or in a VR experience, and bring them into our core activities.
Yeah, it's definitely an exciting time. And again, folks, for those watching, that's right here in Western Newfoundland, making waves nationally. I know you've spent some time recently at the National Arts Centre, at Sheridan, really making some connections and speaking on this, as well as your work in other areas, taking you as far as Australia to talk about how this sector must be in order for us to survive. So it's an exciting time, a transformational time for Camber Arts. And coming up next on the show, we actually have a frequent Camber Arts collaborator, Robert Humber, now going by a moniker Archives, with a little bit about his brand new album. So we'll listen to a little bit of that, and then we'll come right back with Robert here on the show. Welcome back. So that was a bit of Archives' new project, first project really, in this moniker. So welcome to the Stage Door, Robert. Lovely to have you here.
Thanks, Ian.
So before we talk about Archives and this new album, we'll talk a little bit about you. Where did it all begin for you as a musician from here in Western Newfoundland?
So as you know, Ian, a lot of people from Western Newfoundland and Newfoundland abroad, we all kind of play music, you know, like, or lots of us, whether we decide to like pursue it more professionally later on. There's just the whole kitchen party culture and everything, and so that's kind of how it started for me. My dad played in bands, and my mom just plays things, even though she's not in a band or anything, and so we'd have buddies over, you know, Dad's friends would come over, and whatever instrument was kind of sitting in the corner, I would pick up and start playing, you know, and that's just kind of kept going.
Yeah, and that's certainly the one of the skills that I think many who have worked with you know you for, is that ability to kind of pick something up and spend a couple minutes with it and be like, oh, this is how this works. And make really
something
cool
out
sounds,
of it.
Something out of it. Yeah, exactly. And I think it's interesting because I know you always had the goal of composition. That was always the space that you wanted to go towards. So in going to music school, you went with the tuba, which you haven't really played much since.
No.
But it was kind of a vessel to that means. So what was that like to decide to go with this instrument with those goals?
Yeah, well, I played tuba in band, like in high school band, and I think I decided to go with the tuba knowing that I wanted to compose, because I love piano, but there's a lot of pianists out there, and a lot of them are trained. I wasn't a trained pianist, I just played on my own. And so it's a lot of competition in that field to get into a music school playing piano. So there's not very much competition on tuba. So that's kind of why I picked that. And you know, when I went to music school, then I kind of did fall in love with the tuba to a certain degree, but you know, I was just never a tubist at heart. I was a composer, and so once I finished my degree and everything, the composing sort of continued to take off, and tubas are hard to move. I move a lot, and tubas are hard to move.
Definitely one of the trickier instruments to carry around.
Yeah.
And of course, composition's done very well for those locally who've seen Camber Arts. Probably most of the work that you've shared has been when Camber went by Grossmore and Summer Music.
Yeah.
But you know, you've got to compose with the Atlantic String Quartet for the Mummer's Journey.
Yeah.
Which is just amazing. You know, what a
Yeah,
group to
they're
compose
great,
for. Dark by Five, Camber's
Yeah.
resident ensemble for a number of years, and really working on different arrangements of different artists for various shows, including some of the spectaculars that we used to do on the
Yeah.
Arts and Culture Center stage. So it's been quite a journey, and a journey that you spent a lot of time here working on that.
Yeah.
And now some original composition for Stephen Eckert, pianist from Stephenville,
Yeah.
and Hilary Nee, a wonderful dancer choreographer based here in Corner Brook. So it's certainly been a big journey for someone starting out in composition to have so many different things that you've been able to do through the years.
Yeah, and yeah, a lot of these sort of the beginning of my professional career, if you want to call it that, like composing for shows. A lot of it happened here, right?
Yeah.
Like with Grossmore and Summer Music, Camber Arts, and that was just like some really important early experiences, being able to work in real life situations, you know, and really inspiring for me.
Yeah, no, I think it's so exciting to look back on that. You know, having been there at that time doing some of these compositions,
Yeah,
but also that summer in Woody Point with Jody Richardson, and you were able to
Jody.
work on a Tragically Hip piece with Jody for kind of a mass choir presentation. So
Yeah.
even down to those type of things, you really did have a widely dispersed, whether for specific instrument arrangements versus a choir where it's everyone. So finding a way to kind of simply do something that can bring it to life is just so exciting. I think the variety that you got to have at that time, and it's kind of come full circle in a way. Coming up, we won't say what the piece is yet, but Robert has an arrangement that's going to premiere actually in May.
Oh, yes.
With Camber Arts, with our chorale, which is so exciting that we're able to share that and get you back here in that role. But enough about that, and about the current upcoming excitement of Our Sheaves. You know, I've listened through the album a couple of times now, and it's just so rich with instrumentation, which is, again, no surprise. You have many instruments, and I think you might have used all of them in this, or at least many. And it's a real gift to listen to. Produced right here in Corner Brook, Milltown Records, and 62 Broadway, so super exciting. And it's actually having a launch on March 22nd at the Rotary Arts Center. It's going to be a really wonderful event, and it's a great chance to get your hands on a copy.
Yeah.
I'm sure Milltown has them, and I know Robert
I
has
should
some
have brought
too.
one.
Yeah.
That would have been smart, but the cover looks nice.
There we go. So what inspired that? What's the big takeaway from it, and what inspired it to come to existence?
The album?
Yeah.
What inspired it? I guess, I mean, at the sort of background of everything was just, for many years, I've wanted to do something like this, and finally kind of had the time and had what I felt like I had the tools to finally make it. And you know, I was spending a lot of times, you say it was produced at Milltown, but actually it was really produced all over the country. Like, I was in Calgary, living in Calgary for a little while for part of it, and like produced a lot of it like in an old log cabin, like off the grid. And I was just like in all of these different places and feeling inspired. So there's all these different tracks, and some of them feel like Calgary, or feel like this log cabin. Some of them feel like Newfoundland, because some of it was made in Newfoundland. So it really, like, if you look at the cover of the album, it's a picture of me, and it's this collage that I made using all of these pictures that I've taken throughout Canada, and actually the United States. And just stitched together. So to me, when I listen to the album, it feels like a travel album. It's like, it just has these little pieces of all these moments in my life and all these places that I've been.
Yeah, well, I think it's certainly exciting, and congratulations on the release. So, folks, if you're able to go, March 22nd is a pretty busy day in Corner Brook. There's 2 really exciting projects happening at the Arts and Culture Centre. Tara Emanuel has To All the Premiers I've Ever Loved, brand new piece of puppet political theater, very specific genre, but certainly worth seeing. And of course, Archives has that album release happening at the Rotary Arts Centre. So 2 great events, make your pick, go to one of them, get out and support the arts here in Corner Brook, and we'll listen to a little bit more of that album as the credits roll. Thanks for tuning in at the Stage Door.
Yeah, I know what I've got, and I know